the state of U.S. soccer and why I believe that the U.S. soccer community will become the most competitive breeding ground for talent in the world in the next 5 to 10 years. Just before I go into this episode, I want to caveat this episode for people who are not interested in sort of sports and the development of sports. It's still worth listening to this because I think we can learn a few lessons for what it means to build training ground for talent. Talent is the scarce resource of the future. Talent, creativity is going to be the key to any kind of success anywhere. I don't care which country you are or which state or whatever you're trying to achieve. I think we're way beyond the sort of natural resource, fighting wars over oil and this stuff and that stuff. That might sound a little bit crazy right now where we have this aggression by Russia and the energy crisis in Europe because of that. But I think this is actually a catalyst to unravel the world into a David Deutschian future world of creativity, and anything is possible unless it's not prohibited by the laws of physics. Of course, before I say that, there is always the possibility of nuclear war or something like that, and then all of this is useless. But assuming the world gets through this, we are at a crossroads here of a world which is going to be driven by talent and almost only talent. So if you're a young person right now, focus on your talent. Don't think about anything else. This is the short message. But I want to talk about U.S. soccer, and the reason is because I have an experience right now. My son plays in the system, and this podcast is by no means sort of a family reminiscence or anything like that. I don't care. It's just because I have an experience I think I can share, and I think it's valuable. So why do I believe U.S. soccer is at the crossroads right now, becoming one of the most, if not the most competitive league for talent development? I'm not talking about the MLS particularly. I don't have a view on that because there are certain structures, particularly in Europe, that are in place with money and things like that, that probably will make it a little bit more difficult for an international league to win all the best paid talent. But at least for producing young talent, the US is on the right trajectory. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's April 3rd, 2022. This is Krim Delko. It's a Sunday. There's no update. The fund is still down 3.9% for the year, and the market is down 4.4%. We are outperforming by 50 basis points. So US soccer has changed in the last 2 years when it comes to talent development. There was something called the US Development Academy, which has been in place for about 20 years. It has produced some good talent. I think we have the results of that right now with a decent national team. We have a lot of young players going to Europe at young ages, 16, 17, 18. So there's definitely been some success with US Development Academy. I think this is now has changed. About a year and a half ago, the US Development Academy was shut down, and instead we have what's called MLS Next. MLS Next is a league which is meant for young people to play at the regional and national level in a very competitive environment. There are several ages for this. The two that matter the most, the two that are sort of at national scale, are what's called the U15 and the U17 divisions. The U15 division just means you have to be under 15 years old to sign up for this division, and U17 you have to be under 17, and this is at time of signing up. So let's say if the season starts in August, you have to be under 15, and then next year, when the season finishes in June, you can be 15 in that year, and then you will switch over to the next higher level in terms of age group. So these are the two age groups that matter. There are lower age groups, U13, U14. They are more on the regional scale. So think of it like a much bigger tryout for the two that matter, the U15 and the U17. So this is sort of the lay of the land. Now, of course, setting this up by itself is probably, that's not the holy grail. We have this in almost any country in the world in one form or the other. But what the MLS is doing extremely well is it's creating an elitist culture around those divisions. And this, to me, is going to be the big kicker here. So to use an analogy, I think what the US is going to build with this MLS Next is very similar to what the US has built with the university system after World War II. Before World War II, the place to go to really get educated, meaning get education at the highest level, the most prestigious education you could get, was to go to Europe, in particular the UK, Germany, and maybe France. So those were the places you would go. Vienna, of course, also, because that's where the biggest talent was. That's where this was, that was. It was just, let's say, Oppenheimer, the guy who built the atomic bomb at the Alamo Institute. He got his PhD or postdoc or something like that in Berlin, I believe, or Vienna. And that was really the most prestigious thing to do before World War II. After World War II, the US academic system, for several reasons, of course, there was lots of refugees also that came here, academic refugees, but the US academic system built this enormous machine of elitism, which today has turned into by far the most prestigious academic system in the world and the best breeding ground for academics also in the world. And I think very similarly, I can see the US Soccer Federation doing the same thing with MLS. Now, to be clear, it's actually not the US Soccer Federation which is doing this with MLS. It is MLS itself, the league itself. So this is private. This is not national. And I shouldn't even have said that. So it's very important. This is not a national thing. This is the MLS, the league. So the MLS is very much like the NFL or the NBA. It's a league. It's a privately owned league by the teams, by the owners of the teams. And they decide how they're going to breed talent. And what they're creating already, I can see it already now, is a culture of elitism, which means that if you're in, you get to travel, you get to play high-level teams, you get to play teams across the country. And if you're not in, you're pretty much out of this club of elites. And that, to me, is the biggest kicker now. Of course, you have to add to this the available talent pool, which is huge in the US, and the money, which is also available for the teams. At least so far, I can see the money is available. That's a whole other podcast episode, why I believe there is enough money in the soccer system. It's actually not because soccer is so popular in the US. I think it has to do with local real estate law and things like that. Again, just briefly, I think if you're a local magnate, let's say you have made money somewhere locally in Salt Lake City or in Sacramento or places like that, even LA or New York, you can get very good deals in terms of, let's say, if you have a team, you can then build facilities and probably get some good kickbacks from the local community. If you do that, and let's say you own a construction company or have some connections with local businesses, it can be very helpful. So I think that's part of the reason why we have so much money in the system, because I think the MLS as a league is pretty successful, well, not that successful, but nevertheless, that's not the subject of the podcast. The subject of the podcast today, of this episode, is to understand why I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be enormous talent built in the United States. It has to do with elitist culture, with aspiration, with quality on the playing side, quality on the coaching side. Because once you have this aspirational culture ingrained into the people, then it's not just going to be the players who want to join the league. It's also going to be the coaches, the technical staff. Everybody's going to want to be part of it. And I can see this right now. My son plays in a very competitive team at the MLS Next level at U15, but he's not part of an MLS academy. He's part of what's called an elite team, which is a team which is admitted to the MLS Next, but it's not part of an MLS team. And I see a bifurcation going forward, at least the way it's set up now, that if you're part of this so-called elite teams, you're just going to be a second-class citizen, and that you're going to want to play in the MLS. And what this will do is, and I can see it with my son, it will just pull all the talent to what's MLS teams, their youth academies. Of course, it's going to be much harder to get in, and this is a flywheel. You can already see where this is going. The more elitist these teams become, the more people will want to go there, the more talent will be attracted to those teams, the more elitist they become. So this flywheel is just going to keep spinning. And it's of course, it's not just let's talk about the positives of this. The positive is that you will have an enormous concentration of talent, that you have a lot of people maybe that were on the brink in the past of maybe choosing another sport. They will actually choose this very prestigious MLS Next route. And that will create a lot of competition, a lot of excellence, a lot of things that are good for the quality of people which will come out. And this, I think this is exactly what's happening, let's say, in the academic system. You have this elitist situation in places like Stanford, etc., and that will in itself breeds more talent being attracted. And then we have more elitist also coaching or teaching on the academic. side, and I think that just breeds talent. That's why I think we will have in the coming 5 to 10 years, there's a high likelihood that the United States will create a whole huge pool of very, very successful talent. Now, how this is going to pan out at the professional level, right now, what's happening is that a lot of young kids are being traded to Europe. They go to European academies, and that's because the European academies are still the sort of place to go to. They're prestigious, but that could change. We could see potentially at some point even a change in the league's prestigious acumen, and you could have professional players actually staying here and playing. I don't know about that, but what I am, like I'm saying here, pretty certain is that we will have a big wave of very high grade US talent playing the sport. Now, the downside of all of this is, of course, enormous pressure on the kids, enormous, not just pressure, but it's how should I say, well, it's kind of like it's an up or out situation. And if I want to use the analogy with the academic system here, it's almost like if you don't make it to the top, you might as well not play. I mean, this is kind of the way I see it now. There's the college system, which is being, again, it's being bifurcated away from the professional system. In the past, under the DA system, there was always this dual path where you could go professional, and if not, you go to college, you play, and then if you still want to go professional, you can go to what's called a super draft. I think that's going to go away. I think the professional path for kids that are between the ages of 15 and 19 will be decided in the MLS Next curriculum. The MLS Next, by the way, has not just the U15 and the U17 divisions. They now have a new one called the MLS Next Pro, which allows the kids that are not eligible for U17 to still play at a very high level within the the MLS Next sort of umbrella, but not at the full pro level. So it's kind of like a second team of the pro teams, but it's still part of the MLS Next umbrella. It's still, in other words, you have to be part of an academy of an MLS team. So only MLS pro teams such as Galaxy, Sounders, Real Salt Lake City, and etc. Only their academies will count. The other academies will not count, even if they are admitted to play MLS Next. And a lot of those teams, those so-called elite teams, they are playing MLS Next, but they're not playing the top teams. They're playing amongst each other. So this is a second-class citizen type situation. So again, the purpose of this podcast episode particularly is to just lay out the way I think you can create a system that is highly prestigious and therefore attract talent, and that will cause a flywheel effect, positive flywheel effect, which will proliferate a lot more US talent into the world of soccer. This is the purpose of this podcast episode particularly. The purpose of this podcast is, of course, to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And you might ask, well, what does US soccer have to do with hedge fund? Again, I'm talking now about talent development, and we can sort of draw the arch here. We can say, okay, fine, look, it's about soccer talent in specific, but you can look at this also. How do you develop talent? You develop talent by creating prestigious, elitist, exclusive situations that attract talent. And this is what the academic system has done. And this is also what companies do to some extent. Now, of course, there is always a danger. Companies like Tesla, they better keep their wings wide open. And this is, of course, if we talk now about the negatives, like I said, it creates a lot of pressure on kids. It creates also a very early selection system. Okay, maybe with the age of 15 or 16, you're not good enough to make it to the MLS Next level within an academy of an MLS team. Maybe you're not that good, but maybe with the age of 20, you're a late bloomer and all that stuff. Maybe, but I guess that's the price that everybody's willing to pay in a system like that, because no matter what, the majority of high-performing kids, actually, they're not late bloomers. They are able to perform at that age. This is kind of the age where kids are bifurcated into high performers and not. Actually very similar with school, also high school, for example, where you're being bifurcated, maybe now with 15, maybe with 16, 17, but it's not very different. These are the years when you are being selected, and then your highest performance, of course, is in the mid-20s. Thank you.